These are four claims that kind of still really underpin a lot of our understanding of what museums are. I think this is very much figured, these claims in different ways, within the responses museums and museum professionals and thinkers about museums have made to Brexit. And there's also a kind of allied Trump debate going on in relation to museums and their role as well, but I will focus here on Brexit. Some people have really sort of said we need to reinforce those Enlightenment values. We need to absolutely kind of re-emphasise these are public spheres where people should come and debate and discuss. We should be working harder for mass participation, so the inequalities within visitors to museums is not acceptable, and we need to continue to seek to include everyone, and often really people are talking about working class communities when that comes up, as well as people from black and minority ethnic groups. That there should be, as a result, different representations and better representations of those communities within the museum. An openness to difference and exploration of conflict, something we touched on already this morning. People have also reached for strengthening participatory approaches and how museums themselves can embody democratic values. So this is not dissimilar to debates that are going on actually in the public sphere generally and around what government should do. I mean, I think this is in the air. Museums are just one place where this is very much happening at the moment. So just to take the first of those three, I suppose one of the things I'm going to pose, and I wonder whether this might end up being the core of our discussion later on, whether some of these approaches of reinforcing Enlightenment values, conceiving of demographic inequalities that you then, having conceived them in that way, use to seek to increase access, and plus questions of representation, whether they have a lot of road left for us as museums. So these are the same strategies we've been using for the last 40 years. Like in some museum services, some of the ones that I've worked in Glasgow, in the North East, Timeware Archives and Museums, these have been going on for literally decades. And while they've made some inroads into demographic inequalities in terms of who attends museums, and there have been some success stories, and there is no doubt that museums have tried these approaches, have more equal and inclusive demographics in terms of their visitor figures than ones that have not tried this. Nevertheless, it has not been transformative. It has not changed the paradigm. Museums are still for, Mark O'Neill would say this as previous director of Glasgow Life and previously of Glasgow Museums, it's not fundamentally transformed who attends museums, in spite of all of that work. And I also think, and I'll say a bit more about this, that representation and the idea of museums needing to do that boxes museums into a certain kind of corner. It creates a certain kind of relationship between the museum and those people. And I'm going to try and rethink some alternatives in a moment. And I think all of that argument relies on reserves of public trust that exist in museums. So the Museum Association's research from 2013 found that museums were absolutely, unlike some other public institutions, still places that people trusted around knowledge and around what they did, and that's a really positive thing. But I worry that these approaches are doubling down and actually really running on reserves, on fumes of a past legitimisation of museums that are not going to work now. And we actually need to take this opportunity to more radically reimagine what public trust might mean in the 21st century. I think loving around, being open to conflicts and exploring difference, strengthening participatory approaches, exploring what democratic values might mean for museums, I think there's more road there. I think they're more promising, but there's a kind of but, really. I think that there is a fundamental shift that we need to be making. There's now an enormous body of participatory practice going on in museums, like enormous amounts. It's gathered an enormous amount of pace over the last 10, 15 years from some amazingly innovative early work, like the Open Museum in Glasgow, co-production in Croydon. There's lots of examples of early work, but subsequently there's been this kind of flowering of it. Most museums are doing it in some way. The HLF has created a public funding support for it. There are many practitioners who are really fundamentally interested in that, an incredible and exciting resource. But often the concern is that this participatory practice does not fundamentally challenge the core. That language of core is used both by people like Mark O'Neill and Nick Merriman, who are interested in this kind of question of mass participation and really addressing some of those demographic deficits. It's also been used by the Our Museum project, which was a project to look at how to extend participatory practice in museums that ran over previous years. The idea that it's seen as, in a sense, an add-on. Nice to have, happens when you've got funding, but doesn't otherwise happen. And so there's this kind of sense that it's not getting to the fundamentals of what museums are. And yet, to get to the fundamentals of museums are, we actually probably need to really look quite hard at what we think museums are, and think ontologically about it. So it's a big word for something really simple. It's actually getting back to the fundamentals of what we think there is in the world, what we think museums are, what we think are the ingredients of what museums are, and how they relate to each other. So having a more fundamental conceptual shift for participatory practice, for transforming what the museum is and reimagining what these ideas are public. So in a kind of traditional museum ontology, sort of its theory of what the world is and what it contains, there are people and there are objects. You know they're different. There's an inside and an outside. You know that this is a museum and outside's the community or the city. And again, they're separate. This is a little bit reflects in some of the interviews you've done recently, Bella, this idea that there's an outside that's clearly out there and an inside that's very clearly inside. That objects can be used to stand in for or represent people and other objects. That there is a past, present and a future. The past is complete, the future's out there, the present is where we are. The museums act on people. It's very neatly summed up in the Museums Change Lives paradigm of the Museum Associations. The museum is an actor, it can impact on people. And that in order to mediate and maintain this worldview, professionals make decisions on behalf of everybody, now, hopefully in the future generations. So I want to think about what's really opened up for museums and really innovative collaborative practice if we think about museums through a participatory ontology, a way that is not fundamentally about representation or things or people standing in for other things and people. So a person doesn't stand in for anyone else, a claim is not made on behalf of other people, an object doesn't represent anything other than what it is. Every instance of human life is singular, not unique, but produced through a web of, connections and distributions, often unequal, of resources and connections. Museums aren't separate from life, but are places of life itself. They're not representing something else that's happening out there, but they are the place where things are happening. And museums are active in the world as co-producing reality. They are where reality is being made, not simply a place where reality is represented. So I take a cue from an academic's work here, Anne-Marie Moll, who talks about a shift from the metaphors of perspective and construction to intervention and performance. So a reality that isn't observed and then represented but is done, and the museum being a place where reality is done in the work that it does. And so it opens up different ways of thinking about time and change as well. Thinks about the world in complex ways, so the world is made up of interactions of lots and lots of different factors, that interventions don't have easy cause and effects that can be traced in a linear way, that change the property, emergent property of lots of these different interactions, that they're beyond the kind of object dualism. You can think about relationships of people, things, ideas, and the power in that model is not a kind of top-down action on, but is pervasive as part of all of human interactions. It's distributive and it can be positive, it can be productive as well. But it allows you to think about how power works as part of an everyday practice, as part of everyday participatory practice. So in a moment I'm going to start to talk about Bradford and the project we're doing there in quite nitty-gritty terms, so I'm going to try and bring it into everyday practice, because I know it's been a bit high level in a way, but I think there's a shift to the museum claims that could be really productive, that we could be making at the moment through practice, through everyday work. From representation to living, so for museums to move from thinking about representation as an endpoint. So we've recognised your community by putting your stories on in the museum, and that's the end, to thinking about it as a living, dynamic, ongoing production of culture and dynamic debate and discussion. Linked to that, not thinking about an access model to museums where access conceptually indicates the culture is inside, that there is a wall in the way, that it's opened up, people are allowed in, to seeing culture and heritage as an ongoing collaborative creation that involves those resources but is not determined by that access to those resources. To move away from the abstraction of everyone, which I think gets us into enormous amounts of trouble. So the idea of an impossibly expansive everyone and an impossibly expansive future generations has the effect of forcing power onto professionals to work on behalf of what can't be in any way manifested. Everybody can't manifest everybody. And instead using participatory approaches to create space for anyone who is interested to become actively involved within the museum. And I have an answer to the thing that probably some of you are thinking about inequalities there. It does have to be proactive, you have to go and meet people, you have to go to where they are as part of that, but you don't conceive everybody as an everyone, which is too abstract to work with and ends up reinforcing power in professionals' hands, I would argue. A move from a conservation model to a thriving model. This is slightly more awkward, I think, in the way I'm perceiving it, so we get to discuss it. But we need to think, and I have lots of interesting works going on in conservation practice around this, so this is me just drawing it into this kind of wider ontological discussion around rethinking conservation as protection, which is kind of protected now, limited use because of this future generations that we need to make sure it's still there for. To think of conservation as a kind of thriving material social practice from which the future is constantly being made. So the future isn't the preserved professional making a decision that makes sure that future exists. The future actually is made in the dynamic, exciting discussion of meaning, of which objects, buildings, places are part. And there is something there about wise use. You actually aren't conserving collections if they lose their meaning, if their meaning isn't being dynamically renewed. So there is something about use as being part of conservation rather than opposed to conservation that I think we need to conceptually move towards. And finally, we need to move away from an impact model. We need to stop thinking of museums as agents who reform others. This kind of beneficiaries model is a real barrier, I think, to good collaborative work. Instead, museums need to see themselves as collaborators within wider systemic transformation, and this is where the inequalities issue fits. Like if there are inequalities within your local place, the museum can be an active explorator in developing inquiries on how to transform that with the people that are involved, rather than seeking it to be something that's done to those people. And therefore renew democratic culture in various ways. So it's a kind of overarching shift that can potentially be enabled by some of these approaches. And it's uncertain and it's all experimental and there are lots of sticking points. And we can talk a bit more about those. But one of the places that I'm exploring some of those approaches is through the Bradford's National Museum project. It's funded by the Arts and Humanities Research Council and it was collaboratively designed. So it's based at the National Science and Media Museum in Bradford, as we said. The National Science and Media Museum is part of the Science Museum group, which has 4 sites in England. It has one in London, the Science Museum, one in Manchester, one in York, the Railway Museum, and it has the one in Bradford, the National Science and Media Museum. In 2012, which ties very nicely into some of Bella's arguments earlier on, that museum was under, the director of the Science Museum group said that if the comprehensive spending review was as negative as it looked, one of the northern museums would need to be shut. Everyone in Bradford assumed immediately it would be that one, probably correctly. And there was a massive petition, a lot of activism to try and keep the museum open. This project was designed in the wake of that, because while we recognised that people did not want the museum to close, because it would seen as an enormous vote of disconfidence within Bradford, a city that has various economic challenges already, people were not that, it was like it was an idea. The museum was just an idea. It wasn't somewhere that they went to, that they cared about in detail, that they knew what was there. There were some historic things that people remembered as children, but it was important the museum didn't close, not that the museum was, in a kind of more living way. So this project, which was designed by the museum, by some academics at the University of Leeds, including me, but also by a series of community collaborators who have got fantastic community networks within Bradford. Just to give one example, because there are loads of us involved in this project, Bradford Community Broadcasting, which is a local community radio station. So we all got together and started to explore these issues and came up with a research design that explored some of these questions.